For over a decade, indie game funding meant exactly one thing: Kickstarter. In the early 2010s, it was the center of a digital gold rush, an era of pure romanticized hype, where a developer with nothing more than an idea on a piece of paper could bypass corporate publishers, ask gamers directly for their money, and build a generation-defining masterpiece. But as the hype grew, the cracks slowly started to show. The blind trust that built the foundation of the platform quickly turned into a massive burden. For every successful campaign, 10 others either failed, underdelivered, or were straight-up scams. This led to the end of the gold rush and shattered the supremacy of Kickstarter when it comes to indie games. A reality that was recently confirmed by legendary developer Ron Gilbert, who stated in an interview that Kickstarter is basically dead these days as a way of funding games. As a result, many developers migrated to other platforms like Patreon, completely rethinking the classic crowdfunding model. However, to understand this massive shift in the indie crowdfunding space, we first have to look back and examine the era where it all actually began: the golden age of Kickstarter. To understand why Kickstarter became so popular in the first place, we have to acknowledge how brutal the gaming industry was before it and still is today. Making a game is outrageously expensive, even for big publishers. So it comes as no surprise that for solo developers and small teams, securing funding meant basically bowing down to publishers' demands. However, with the launch of Kickstarter in 2009, things started to shift. With its high-stakes, all-or-nothing model, it became the perfect place for independent developers to secure funding outside of the traditional ways. Early on in the platform's life, the campaigns were rather simple. Many developers only launched with an idea, maybe some concept art, relying completely on people's trust in their vision and abilities. And many of these visions actually came to life, delivering games that didn't just meet expectations, but fundamentally reshaped the entire industry. Look at Shovel Knight, for example. In 2013, the studio Yacht Club Games asked for a modest $75,000 to make a retro platformer. Ultimately, they raised an astonishing $300,000. But more importantly, they set the gold standard for Kickstarter transparency. They systematically over-delivered on every single stretch goal, turning a small indie game into a legendary franchise. Then there was Undertale. The developer Toby Fox launched a campaign with a target of just $5,000. On paper, it was an eccentric pixel art RPG. In reality, they eventually raised $50,000, allowed the solo developer to build one of the biggest cultural phenomena and highest rated games of the decade. And perhaps the ultimate triumph, Hollow Knight. Team Sherry, a tiny Australian team, asked for $35,000 to finish a hand-drawn game about an intriguing bug kingdom. What backers got in return wasn't just a good indie title, it was arguably one of the greatest Metroidvanias ever created. These games prove the ultimate promise of early Kickstarter: that all that it takes to make a great game is a passionate audience, spotting true indie gems before any big corporate publisher ever could. But for every story like Hollow Knight, dozens of others were quietly building up another, more damaging reality. Kickstarter's foundation was built on unbridled trust. But trust, as many backers were about to learn, doesn't always guarantee a finished product. As Kickstarter grew into a household name, first cracks started to show. What began as a golden age slowly devolved into disheartening reality. The initial hype faded as backer fatigue set in, driven by perpetual delays, scope creep, and an alarming surge of failures and outright scams. The core issue was the one thing everything else was built around: trust. Backing a Kickstarter project meant paying for a promise, and many developers simply couldn't or wouldn't deliver. Many different missteps proved that passion and some concept art didn't automatically translate to proper budgeting or actual execution of the projects. Nothing illustrated this decline better than two distinct case studies that hit the community in the late 2010s, showcasing a shocking financial betrayal from within and a massive unchecked scope creep. First, let's look at Ant Simulator. After raising over $4,000 on Kickstarter in 2016 and building real momentum, the project suddenly imploded. The lead developer announced the game's cancellation in a YouTube video after discovering that his co-founders had allegedly spent the majority of the Kickstarter money on liquor, dinners, and strippers, which later turned out to be more complicated than that, with the two co-founders actively denying the claims. It was a shocking and truly devastating disaster that proved one crucial thing. At the end of the day, backers had zero oversight over where their money actually went once a campaign succeeded. And if the case of Ant Simulator exposed the lack of financial accountability, Chronicles of Elyria revealed the danger of unchecked ambitions. Marketed as a revolutionary MMORPG with aging mechanics and a player-driven world, Chronicles of Elyria raised over $1.3 million on Kickstarter in 2016. But after this massive influx of capital, the developers Soulbound Studios still didn't have enough. They began selling both cosmetic items and mechanically useful items, all for a game that didn't even exist yet. However, after years of slow progress, the studio suddenly laid off all its staff and announced that the development had halted in 2020. What followed was years of lawsuits, broken promises, and shattered trust. Nowadays, development has apparently restarted, even though it seems more like a facade than actual progress. These two cases, together with many more, marked a turning point in the crowdfunding space. Backing a Kickstarter campaign no longer felt like helping someone build a dream. It felt like a high-risk gamble, where at the end of the day, backers were the ones who had to pay the price. This gradual loss of trust led to many people no longer being willing to back Kickstarter campaigns in the future, which slowly forced independent developers to search for new, more creative forms of fundraising. One thing became abundantly clear over time. Developers no longer were able to rely on a simple promise. If they wanted to secure sustainable funding, they had to have something to show. This realization led to two major shifts that changed how a lot of games are funded today. The first shift was the rise of subscription-based crowdfunding through platforms like Patreon. Unlike Kickstarter's high-stakes, all-or-nothing model, these newer platforms offered a recurring monthly stream of income, albeit with one crucial catch: constant accountability. Developers no longer could just take a bucket full of money and disappear without a trace. To keep monthly subscribers, they had to deliver regular updates, an open communication, and eventually playable builds, which in turn benefited the backers by over time giving them more certainty over a developer's true intentions, minimizing the high risk of scams. One of the most recent successful examples of this funding model is the life simulation game Paralives. It built a high monthly budget over time by simply showing consistent and transparent progress every single week until its early access release. Which leads me directly into the second and perhaps most dominant shift in recent years: early access on Steam. The rise of early access games turned the whole crowdfunding scene upside down. Why invest only in an idea or some progress updates when you can actually buy a game in development and play it today? Early access completely flipped the script. Through it, developers are able to release a baseline of a game as a proof of concept, and backers can actively buy it, try it out, and give immediate, valuable feedback. Recent smash hits like Palworld or Hades 2, which both hit 1.0 rather recently, are proof, among many others, that the early access model can truly work by benefiting both sides equally. However, we still have to consider that both models continue to have their risks, albeit lower than the high stakes of Kickstarter. Failures and scams are still possible. Just look at the absolute disaster that was The Day Before, which released in early access in December of 2023. It was marketed as a groundbreaking open-world zombie MMO, only for it to launch as a broken, bare-bones extraction shooter. The situation at the time was so bad that the game got pulled from Steam only days after its release, with Steam eventually refunding all purchases due to extreme backlash. Looking back at the trajectory of indie game funding over the last 2 decades, one thing is absolutely clear. The desire to help passionate developers bring their vision to life has never changed. But the era of paying for promises is officially over. Kickstarter proved that players are eager to back big ideas. However, the many failures and scams of the past forced developers and players alike to adjust. The rise of subscription-based models, as well as early access, proved exactly that. Crowdfunding itself didn't die, it just changed. However, at the end of the day, no system or platform is entirely immune to failures and scams. But by replacing simple promises with playable builds and more transparent communication, the indie crowdfunding scene ultimately found a safer path forward. Crowdfunding has truly evolved from a high-stakes gamble into a true partnership between developers and players. Now, I want to hear from you. What is your opinion on crowdfunding games in general? Have you ever backed a game? And if so, what game was it? Let me know in the comments down below. And if you enjoyed this little dive into this topic, make sure to leave a like and subscribe if you want to see more content like this. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in my next video. Take care.